Arguably, Ford's biggest news of the year was the release of the all-new Ford F-150 not that long ago, and the second biggest news for pretty much the entire auto industry has to be the return of the Ford Bronco. The Ford Bronco is certainly going right after the Jeep Wrangler. With this generation of the Bronco, we're going to get removable doors, removable roofs, and Ford is promising far more usable practicality for those removable items than we see in the Jeep lineup. Let's start out by looking at the exterior design. You can see that Ford was certainly going for a retro look with the Bronco, but they've also decided to give this a modern twist. So this is not all in on retro like we see some vehicles out there. The Bronco does look a little bit like previous generation Broncos, but it also reminds me a little bit of the Hummer product line, perhaps with a different grille. Let me know what you think about that down there. You can see that we have full LED headlamps, the big Bronco logo right there, some LED fog lights, and some big toe shackles on the front. At the front of the hood, you see what looks like sort of black handles. These are tie-down points for kayaks or boats or skis or whatever you want to tie to the top of your Bronco. They designed these so that way you don't have to wrap straps all the way down to the front tow hooks or something like that. It gives you a nice, easy touch point to mount those items onto the vehicle without scratching up the rest of the paintwork. We see some similar little bumps in a Jeep Wrangler, but they don't serve the same purpose necessarily. In the Wrangler, they're there primarily so that way the windshield has something to rest on when you folded it forward. It doesn't appear that we're going to get a fold-forward windshield on the Bronco. The surprising thing I think about the Bronco is that they are bringing us a two-door Bronco. They've admitted that it's not going to sell terribly well in their estimation. According to FCA, about 5% of Wranglers end up being the two-door model, 95% of them are four doors, and Ford says that they are expecting basically the same sort of product split. But it's interesting and an homage to the previous generations of Bronco that they've decided to give us the two-door version. So if you are looking for something that's a little bit more compact, definitely has that two-door style, then Ford's going to have a Bronco for you. And even though the production volume is going to be low, it doesn't appear that they're hobbling the two-door Bronco in any particular way. So it seems like you'll be able to get the same kind of options on the two-door model that we do on the four-door model. Ford didn't give us too many detailed pictures of the rear of the Bronco for some reason, but it does appear to have a very vertical design. The spare tire is mounted to the back. That's pretty much the only place you could put tires this big. According to Ford, the Bronco is going to be the first vehicle in this segment to give us 35-inch tires from the factory. Obviously, you're not going to find those on the base models, but you will find them on clearly the more off-road oriented models. We're going to have a number of different roof options and a ton of different options just all together for the Bronco. They've decided to go all in on customization and personalization, so there are going to be a ton of Ford accessories, and you can bet that the aftermarket is really going to be diving into Ford Bronco accessories. Obviously, it's hard to talk about this kind of vehicle without constantly referencing the Jeep Wrangler, so if any of you are offended by that, just that's the way that it is. Even Ford in their product presentation kept mentioning Jeep without really mentioning Jeep. Some of the big differences between this and the Wrangler are going to be that we have doors that are easier to remove. They're also lighter because they're not a full frame door. The window frame is part of the body of the vehicle, the roof of the vehicle, depending on how you want to look at it. So that way they've been able to reduce the weight of the doors. We also don't have exterior hinges, so it's definitely going to give a cleaner, more perhaps Land Rover look than we see a little bit more of a utilitarian vibe in the Wrangler. And they've also positioned the side view mirrors on the vehicle, not on the doors, so that way you don't have to take them off the door and try and stick them in the little holder on the Jeep. According to Ford, they did a lot of research with current Wrangler owners, and they decided to really improve upon some of the things that Wrangler owners were telling them that they liked and disliked. One of the things that I've noted before is that it's kind of a pain in the butt to remove your doors from your Wrangler. So either you never put them on or you never really take them off. People seem to fall into these two camps largely, and there are relatively few folks out there that just take the doors off on a regular basis just because of the way that the doors are put on. So Ford is promising us a much easier door installation and door removal process, and because the doors don't have frames, you can store all four doors in the cargo area of the Bronco. So that way if you have the soft top, you can more easily take the doors on, take the doors off without leaving them somewhere. Now it's time to dive under the skin. Ford is telling us that the Bronco is riding on an all-new truck chassis. This is really interesting because we can expect that the next generation Ford Ranger is probably going to be closely related to this Bronco. So they've been pretty clear that this is not a simply Bronco body and frame, that the frame will live on in other Ford truck products. And that's quite logical because it allows them to incorporate some more expensive features that they really wouldn't be able to do if the Bronco was completely unique. In addition to having a traditionally designed four-wheel drive system with a transfer case, we also get a ton of different terrain management modes. There are 7 user-selectable modes: normal, eco, sport, slippery, sand, Baja, mud ruts, and rock crawling. And as you'd suspect, two different four-wheel drive systems as well. There's a base system that uses an electronic shift on-the-fly transfer case, and then the advanced system has a two-speed mechanical transfer case that adds an auto mode for on-demand engagement. In the back of the Bronco, we find a Dana 44 axle, which is pretty common in the off-road community. And then, interestingly enough, we have an independent front suspension. And that's part of the relationship we're going to see between this and something like the upcoming Ford Ranger that's probably going to be using a lot of the same suspension. That's going to be a little bit different than the Jeep Wrangler, which is solid axle front and solid axle rear. There are tons of arguments about which is better, whether you should have an independent front suspension or a solid axle for a true rock-crawling off-road vehicle. I'll let all of you fight that out down there in the comment section below, but we are getting a ton of great specifications here. So 11.6 inches of ground clearance, they're claiming that's the best in the segment. We're going to get a maximum 29-degree breakover angle, which is pretty impressive for a vehicle the size of the Bronco. 37.2-degree departure angle, and best-in-class water fording capability of 33.5 inches. That's pretty deep. That's nearly 3 feet. Of course, that is when the water is not flowing, because obviously if you take anything into water that is 33 inches deep and the water is moving swiftly, you're going to be dragged along with the stream. As you'd expect from Ford, under the hood we find two different turbocharged engines to start with. You can expect probably more in the future. Things are going to start out with a 2.3-liter EcoBoost engine shared with the Ford Ranger and a number of other Ford products. That'll produce 310 pound-feet of torque and 270 horsepower. Then there's going to be a 2.7-liter twin-turbo V6 shared with the upcoming Ford F-150. That's going to bump things up to 310 horsepower and 400 pound-feet of torque. Those are easily class-leading numbers. We see a 2-liter turbocharged engine in the Jeep Wrangler lineup and a 3.6 naturally aspirated V6, but there is a diesel engine available if you're interested in that in the Wrangler, and there isn't a diesel yet in the Bronco. I wouldn't be too surprised, though, if we found the F-150's diesel under here at some point in the future. When it comes to transmissions, the rumor mills were right. We're going to get a 7-speed manual transmission in the Bronco, but it's not going to be 7 gears like you normally think. One of the gears is going to be a crawler ratio, so they're calling it a 6+1 transmission. If you're out on the road, you're driving it just like a regular 6-speed, but if you're out on the trail and you want the most aggressive crawl ratio available in any modern car right now, that's going to be what you engage with the +1 gear there. That's going to give you up to 94.75 to 1. That is an absolutely insane crawl ratio. That beats anything that we find in the Jeep lineup by really quite a lot. If you get the 10-speed automatic transmission, then we have a more traditional 67.8 to 1 crawl ratio that's pretty comparable to what we see in the Wrangler lineup. As you might suspect, there are going to be a ton of different editions of the Bronco, just like we see in some of the competitive vehicles out there. But hopping into the interior that they provided us with pictures of, you can really see the striking interior here. The dashboard is dominated by this optional 12-inch touchscreen infotainment system. It's going to be running basically the same software that we see in the new Ford F-150 and, of course, the new Ford Mustang Mach-E. The Mach-E is going to be the first vehicle with this software in it, although the screen is going to be a slightly different shape. Now, the 12-inch screen is optional, but you will find it on seemingly quite a number of the Bronco trims out there. If you get the base version of the Bronco, then we get a smaller infotainment screen with slightly different software. As with the F-150 and the Mach-E, Ford is promising over-the-air updates for the lifetime of the Bronco. We also have, if you take a look at the driver's side, a pretty big LCD instrument cluster and Ford's latest steering wheel. If you take an even closer look at a lot of these components, you'll notice that the Bronco is designed to be able to be hosed out, and this is an incremental improvement over what we see in a number of the competition. So in addition to theoretically having some mildly waterproofed items in here, we have some more aggressive waterproofing on some of these components, and we have the ability to get the vehicle without carpet and then have drain plugs in the floorboards, so you can literally wash it out, pull the plug out, and let it drain. Now, for some reason, the drain plugs are going to be optional. You're not going to find those standard in the Bronco. Because a lot of off-roaders love having GoPros and other things attached to their dashboard, Ford decided to make it a little bit easier. So in the dashboard, there's going to be a mounting rail, so that way you can add accessories like GoPros or phone holders or GPS mounts or off-road accessories, whatever those accessories might be. And there's going to be a USB port in the dashboard that will charge these devices so that we don't have to have cables dangling all around. Although there are clearly other off-road vehicles available in the United States, the Wrangler is the most like the Bronco. But even the Wrangler is a little bit different because Bronco decided to go sort of a half step larger. The Bronco's two-door version is 173 inches approximately versus 166 in the Wrangler, so it is about 7 inches longer. And the four-door Wrangler is not quite as long as the four-door Bronco. If you're looking for a really tidy off-road vehicle, keep in mind that the Wrangler has a shorter wheelbase, 96.8 inches versus just over 100 inches in the two-door Bronco. But the reality is, again, the vast majority of Broncos, just like the vast majority of Wranglers, are going to be the four-door model. So in that area, the Bronco actually has a slightly tidier wheelbase, 116 inches versus 118 in the Wrangler, even though the vehicle is a little bit longer. Be sure and let me know what you think about the Bronco down there in the comment section below. Do you think that the Bronco is all that we've been promised? I do. I have to say that I was a little bit worried about what we'd see in there because some folks were a little bit disappointed in the changes that we saw in the F-150, but I think that Ford has really nailed it on the head here. They've given us a lot of convenience features that we don't see in the Wrangler, and they've improved on a lot of the things that has made the Wrangler so great over the last 10 or 20 years and has really contributed to the Wrangler's sales success. The Wrangler and the Bronco used to sell in very tiny numbers, really. The Wrangler was a terribly niche product. Then Jeep stumbled upon the idea of, hey, let's stretch it and give it four doors. The off-road community was really appalled because that makes the Wrangler four-door a lot less off-road capable than the Wrangler two-door for a lot of folks. But it was a sales success, and no one ever thought that they would be selling 170,000 Wranglers a year, but somehow Jeep has managed it. And it's into that world that we now have the four-door Bronco that I think is really building on what we see in the Wrangler and giving us something that's probably going to be more capable, definitely going to be better looking, I think, in its current generation. The Wrangler is pretty classically styled, but it also is getting a little bit boring, in my opinion. I would like to see something new and different there. And the Bronco is that interesting blend of retro and ultra-modern at the same time. But more than that, I think that the Bronco is going to be a little bit easier to live with as the vehicle that you're picturing in your mind. So if you're buying something like a Wrangler or a Bronco and you're thinking to yourself, I really want to drive topless or doorless, etc., the reality is in the Wrangler that it's a bit of a pain to do that. You can do it for sure. You can remove the windshield, you can remove the doors, the top, etc., but not too many people end up either taking them off all that often or honestly putting them back on all that often. Most of the Wrangler owners that I know either never take the doors off or they just never put them back on. So you have this polar opposite thing in the Wrangler. But I think that's going to be a little bit different in the Bronco because they've made it easier to get the doors on and off than the Wrangler, and they've also given us somewhere to put the doors on the vehicle, and they've made that whole process easier by giving the doors a lighter form and having them stow in the back. Obviously, there are a ton of details we don't know just yet, and I haven't driven the Bronco, so hopefully I will be able to do that over the coming few months. It should be on sale relatively soon, so be sure and hit that subscribe button down there at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of our latest videos, including a full and complete detailed drive review of the Bronco just as soon as we can get our hands on it. And if you want to know more about the Bronco Sport, that's going to be in a separate video. Be sure and check that one out as well.